talk about trust, talking about forever, baby. When you talk about us, I give you my word, stick to my guns. Believe me when I tell you, baby, that we just begun. You don't understand, no, the full intent of my plan. Baby, I wanna be the sole provider, yeah. Baby, I wanna stay that way for the longest time. Baby, I wanna be the sole provider. Just say you let me, darling, I will, yeah.
Anyway, so whatever.
You've been hurt.
Probably wouldn't have done that last week.
Know your love's sky.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, Dan. What amazing tones.
How do you like my technique of the cross volume pedal thing, right?
Well, the thing that people don't realize is that if you want to play on hits, you have to use your left foot on the volume pedal.
I had a space board at that time, and I don't. The funny thing is, we were talking about before we started rolling camera, is that I couldn't remember at this date on this small little rig that I have here which side of the volume pedal went.
Yeah.
And so I just said whatever. And so I got whatever. And now I realize that when I do volume pedal stuff, I do it like this.
Well, the amazing professionals at Exactone, they built you a beautiful rig, and I'm sure it would be no feat for them to reorient it in the future if you did want to go that direction.
Right. That's yes.
But if you don't know who we're here with the incredible session guitar player and producer extraordinaire, Dan Huff, for a second interview. We did about this time last year, an interview and kind of covered several of the hit songs that you played on. We're going to get to cover a bunch more today. But most importantly, we're going to get to talk about your brand new solo record, the very first that you've ever put out as a solo artist.
Yes.
So I'm very excited to get to play through more of the hits and get to hear and play some excerpts maybe of the new record so that some people can hear what you're up to. But Dan, I'm just so excited. Obviously, we just heard from the great Michael Bolton, the song Soul Provider, 1989. Do you remember much about working with Michael? We talked about working with Mutt Lange before when you were on the song I Said I Love You But I Lied.
Right.
But do you remember much about this particular song and what transpired?
A little fuzzy, but I mean, and you told me this was released in '89, so we would have probably recorded it a year earlier than that, so '88. I remember that it was a tracking session. This was not an overdub. So the way Peter Bennett and Rick Chudikoff were really serious track guys, and they set a great table. They hired great musicians, and I wish I remembered who was playing on it. It sounds like Robbie Buchanan was playing keyboards. I mean, that sounds like that to me, but I can't remember the rest of the section. But there was always such an energy in their sessions, and I think at this point, Michael had just shifted gears and quit singing metal music, if I'm correct, because he came in the studio. I didn't know who he was. I mean, this was in essence a new artist, at least for me.
Yeah,
and I was probably at the ripe age of 27 or 28 at this point, and had a couple years under my belt, so I wasn't a complete newbie. But you know, I mean, every session date in that time was it was the new frontier. I mean, you proved yourself based on how good what you brought to that song.
Yeah.
And I do remember hearing him sing for the first time. And, you know, I mean, it'd be the equivalent of you just got your headphones on, you're just playing, you're trying to learn these would have been charted out. You know, if it was Robbie Buchanan, who I think it was, the charts would have been like this. So you'd have 2 or 3 music stands. And I was already, it's like, oh God, just play me the song, because I could follow chord charts, but anything else, I was pretty much in the dark, as were a lot of guitar players during that time. Headphones on, and all of a sudden you hear this voice, and it was a moment, jaw dropping. It was like, that's what a voice is supposed to be like.
Wow.
I do remember about Michael too. He's a very serious demeanor, and this is also not just that day, but this just in my getting to know him and having the chance to work with him. Michael Bolton has this demeanor, kind of suave and kind of serious. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met. This guy is funny. You would never know that unless you're on breaks, like in a studio with him, because he doesn't let that out that much. Except, do you remember when he did that Captain Jack thing on SNL?
Yes, I do remember this.
Actually, he was here in this studio in my vocal booth. We were doing, this is years later. I had moved back to Nashville, and we were doing a song together. He wanted me to produce it, so it's kind of full circle. And he was telling me about this. Is it Andy Sandberg, right?
Yeah.
I mean, his bits are great, but it involved a certain line. And Michael, it's funny, he has daughters.
Yeah.
And I have daughters too, so I understood it. He told me, I mean, I guess I can tell this story, but he wasn't sure if he wanted to do it, because the line, I just said the line was off an Al Pacino movie, and it was anyway. You can look it up if you want to. And he wasn't sure that he felt comfortable doing that. And his daughters were the ones who said, "Do it, come on, Dad, loosen up." Anyway, I digress. He's great, and that song. The fun thing about doing this podcast with you is revisiting my 20s. And even that part, I could hear a little, obviously you could hear a little Marvin Gaye, salute there. All those parts, I would say I would owe to either Ray Parker Jr. or Paul Jackson Jr. or David Williams. Mm-hmm. I was such a student of the way they phrased melodies and rhythm. And even within that part, I mean, right now I'm obviously recreating something that I did a long time ago, but every little thing, and where the spaces were, I realized that I was really listening to where the vocal was, mm-hmm. where everything was moving. And I think a lot of it was intuitive, but I just attribute it to a lot of study when I was in that would have been more Ray Parker, because Paul and I are roughly the same age. But when I got out there and I'd see Paul Jackson do those parts, I would spend most of my time looking at Paul and just, whatever they want me to do. They'd always have me do the ethereal things, or I would call it rhythm light. When you'd sit with Paul, it was like it was going to be rhythm light, or they'd have me do the rock guitar parts. But secretly, it was like a master class, watching the way that he would come up with those parts, and not just come up where he would pocket them. So anyway.
Well, then that's the name of the game, is finding those gaps where there's nothing and that your part can come up. He always had said to me that he didn't want to be turned down in the mix, so he needed to find the places where he could stick out. And having that really percussive, rhythm technique was just, part and parcel of the signature sound. And it's absolutely great stuff.
Each note was a canon. I mean, it was just this spacing. That was what I aspired to. And, and I'm not, this is not like some false humility. I became very proficient at that. If Paul's a 10, I was 7.5, maybe hit 8 every once in a while. But boy, I tell you what, the greatest thing was getting to sit in sessions with people like him.
And you got to in DeBarge, you guys did a lot of those sessions togetger.
Yeah, we
Rhythm
did.
of the Night with the Diane Warren song.
Yep. And then I'll extend to other people. I spent a lot of time. We probably talked about this on the first podcast, right? Mike Landau, a ton of sessions with Mike. And again, when you hear somebody like that, it's like, to me, it's the equivalent. Like when somebody makes a cup of coffee for you, why does it taste better when they make it? You're making it with the same machine. You put the same sugar, the same cream in it. There's something about sitting this, well, not quite. We never sat this close, but there's something about hearing the thought process, seeing the way they held the instrument, hearing the touch, and what I'll say about that time period. I think it all of us, we buoyed all of us up because we were always checking each other out. And I'm assuming they would say the same thing, or maybe they didn't, but I'll say it for my part. It was like I got to sit through a master class for about a decade. It was incredible.
Wow.
So, yeah.
We will get right back to the interview with Dan. But before we do, I want to talk to you about a product that I have fallen in love with over the last few weeks. And it is from our friends over at D'Addario, and it is their XPND pedal power supply kits. Now, this is great for me because I like taking very easy to transport rigs to a lot of the gigs that I've been doing. And I've been using the Nano Cortex a lot, which is a very power thirsty pedal. And I can get 2 sets out of this by powering it with the XPND battery power supply. And I don't have to worry about charging it. I don't have to worry about plugging it into the wall. And the issues that I've had with dirty power in clubs is completely gone, completely resolved by way of this. So I have been loving it for that particular application. Now you can also use it with pedals, and you can daisy chain off of it and have a remote power supply that's all self-contained. I do recommend, however, if you're going to do this, that you do it exclusively with analog devices, analog overdrives, distortions, boosts, things of that nature. Typically, things with clocks can get a little bit funky, even if they are analog. If you do want to do that, however, they do offer individual modules that can help filter out any noise. If you're going to be daisy chaining pedals and might have some noise issues, you can use that as a way to treat that. But nevertheless, for my application, I absolutely love it. It's a great product. Highly recommend you check it out. Let's get back now to the interview with Dan. So tone-wise, I know all the gear people out there are definitely going to want to know about kind of what we've got going on here. Guitar-wise, let's start there. What do you have here, Dan?
It's funny you should ask that, Mason. This is a guitar that I love. If you want to get a shot of it, this is it's pretty much a replica of what I found out this past year is my 64 Stratocaster. I thought it was a 63 my whole life until now. 64 Stratocaster. That when I moved to Los Angeles, I think I had just turned 22, and I didn't have a proper Strat. So I went to Norman's Rare Guitars, bought. You want me to grab it and bring it over?
Oh, we can cut in some B-roll of it so people can see it. I'm sure we'll get to use it later.
So it had one scratch on it. It was mint condition. All original, and which was not going to serve my purpose. I was not a guitar collector, so I found out about a guy named Jim Tyler.
And was he working at Norman's? Because for a time he was actually the guitar tech at Norman's. So he was in his garage at that point, or did he have his shop?
He was at Andy Brower's.
Okay.
Cartage,
yep.
Who revolutionized Andy Brower revolutionized cartage, I would say, and
the king of North Hollywood.
Yes, and rentals and. I wasn't Andy's first customer, but I was amongst his first probably 5. I would say. You could ask him, but he was still carting it himself, putting him in his station wagon, and he was dedicated to great instruments for rentals and great services at cartage. Up to that point, cartage was just people hauling gear, slap it in there, right? Andy did it like his company did it like. I would say like the equivalent of a tech on the road. So they would change strings. His employees, they would have gum and coffee sitting on the amps. I mean, it was like, I didn't have to do anything. I didn't have to restring my guitar. You can see why we all love that. In the back of his shop was a guy named Jim Tyler, who was fixing guitars. Very quiet. And I went to Jim and I said, can you, I need this thing. I need to be a rock guitar. I needed to, and my hero, as I told you last time, was Steve Lukather. So I saw Steve's guitars. Give me one of those, whatever. Put a Floyd Rose on it. He asked me quite, he was like, what do you want to do with these pickups? And they're the original. I said, I don't know, just keep them, whatever. I mean, yeah, I could shoot myself now, but that's another story. Anyway, he did all this pickup stuff. Apparently he did it in 2 stages. I didn't remember that, but somebody else told me about that. It has a mid boost, which for soloing is phenomenal, because if you set your distortion too thick when you get in the lower notes, it would always kind of crap out, fuzz out, bottom out. But if you set it too lightly, once you got up to the higher strings, it would start sounding kind of tinny, right? So as I would solo, I'd just dial up that mid boost. What I didn't know is that the mid boost, when in the circuit, added this little glassy component, which ended up being really a staple of all these songs that we're going to.
Yeah, you said in the last interview it was almost always on, but like turned all the way down.
I don't believe that I had I have an on and off switch now to take it out of circuit. I don't usually do it because there's something about that glassiness that I really like. So anyway, I'm sorry about these long answers, but you can edit all this stuff out. Basically, Rich, who's running the company right now, he said they'd like to make not an anniversary, but just a custom model. Basically, everything exactly like that guitar. And I said, well, have at it. He took my guitar part, and they measured, they did all the stuff. So basically, this is that guitar, just newer. And I would argue, I mean, this thing, other than, it's going to take a little while to wear it in. I mean, you got to play it. That guitar it was played every day, probably for 2 decades straight. So I wore it, and it's almost unrecognizable. I mean, and it's so faded. That aside, this guitar sounds identical. I even think it sounds a little bit better. I mean, it's a little punchier to me. But I don't know. I may be a little bit biased.
They did a beautiful job. We were playing it before we started, and I think even Tyler offers it in the exact incarnation of how yours was originally. Yours has a Wilkinson now, which they offer.
Yes.
But they also offer a Floyd Rose version for people that wanted how you had it back in the 80s and 90s. But it's an incredible instrument. And actually, and I don't know if you know this, Dan, but Tyler is actually offering, as part of this video, helping us promote it, they're giving away a JTG Tyler, which is their import version of the Tyler guitar, and they've outfitted it with the pick guard and controls of this instrument. So you're getting all of the same exact, humbuckers, like the Seymour Duncan humbucker, or I think they've got a version that they call the Shark that they make, and then it's got the 2 Duncan stacked pickups in the neck and middle. Right. It's got all of the series parallel switches on it and the mid boost and all that stuff. So they're going to be giving that away as part of promoting this video. So you can check out the link in the description and on screen here if you want to sign up to enter to win it. You're going to get a free JTG James Tyler guitar that's outfitted exactly like yours. So wow. Pretty cool for a lucky someone.
Yeah. I mean, and I'll say this. I don't have a stake in the royalties on this, because so I'm not promoting something that makes money on this thing. It doesn't make me a good guy, but I'm not interested in. I'm interested in having guitars. I love guitars, and I love playing this one. And I'm honored that I get to have my little, my look like a 3-year-old, my scrawl on the back of this thing. But I think it's one of the most. What I've experienced, and this is the truth with my Strat, and this being a replica of that, the most versatile guitar. So, I mean, I have some guitars here, which you said you'll film. I'm not a guitar collector. I've never been a guitar collector, but I do have some nice guitars. I relate to guitars more. They're just tools, right? I would say the 80s through the 90s, when I was playing sessions until I started producing records, I would say percentage-wise, this guitar in the original form, the Strat, I used a ratio of 95 percentile to 5 of any other guitar. Wow. Which is bizarre, because with all the stuff that we're mainly focusing on today, the songs, it's that kind of clean, jangly sound. It's perfect for that. But I also used it on all the heavy rock stuff. And when I had a band at the end of the 80s, Giant, a band that I was the lead singer of, I used it for all that too. So, and that was just shred type material, right? So one guitar, I like having one guitar. It's like, feels like home. I wasn't comfortable switching guitars until probably in my 40s, which is bizarre, which was kind of fun too, because all of a sudden I opened up to a lot of other things. But this sounds like shameless promotion. It's not. It's actually the truth. When I started recording this stuff in the studio for what was going to become a solo record, I hadn't played my Strat seriously, probably save on a couple solos, probably for about 20 years. Because the kind of music that I was producing, it didn't seem to call for it, except every once in a while somebody wanted an 80s-esque type of solo on something, even country music, So I'd use it. But I wasn't as drawn to it for about 20 years. After 20 years of it being in my hands, all of a sudden, for some reason, and I don't remember when the switch was flipped, but I pulled it out and started playing, and it was like all of a sudden I started this project last July, I believe, so not even a year ago, and it ended up being the guitar. This thing came out of that, and here I am with you today again, holding the copy. So
that's amazing.
There you go.
That's amazing. And in the rig we've got, I mean, we're using a little bit of a Lely volume pedal to do some of the swells, but primarily all the sounds are in the box for this.
The reason being is that I retired
your big rack,
beautiful Bob Bradshaw rack, which we all know about Bob and how great he is. It sat in a barn kind of / garage at my oldest daughter's house for probably 10 years, and God knows what kind of spiders were in that thing. But I think I pulled it out once in 20, 30 years and used it, and it like plugged up, sounded great. Mm-hmm. Then I raided some of the stuff out of there. And it was Tom Bukovac and Brandon Hood who actually rescued that thing, because that thing was just gonna deteriorate, and they actually refurbished it, and they held some kind of auction. Somebody bought the thing.
There's somebody in that Dan Huff fan group that I told you about on Facebook that owns it.
Really?
And so they own it, and I think they own some of these guitars, these Tyler guitars, and play Dan Huff licks on it. But this is all the Scuffum amps plugins for this, correct?
Yes, and a little bit of waves. I mean, basically that sound was. Should I review that sound that we're hearing on this record or no?
Well, I think just what we were using. I think it just so folks know what we're using to kind of capture the clean tones, so that they're aware that it is plugins and Scuffum amps, and they've been a great supporter of ours in getting sponsoring the channel and helping people know that that's what you used, and I think that they even, based on the screenshots you had sent last time, had kind of created just presets that were matching what you had used on the previous one. So I might ask you to send me a few so that we can get some of the exact presets for this, unless it's just the stock preset that was used before, so that people can get the same sound if they wanted it.
Well, it's just tweak it. I mean, basically, I had a tri-stereo copy, like that, like it is, and it's in a Dimension D. So it's two choruses fighting and swirling against each other with some delays. Yeah. So, when you first hooked up with me, I didn't have that rack. So, you got to figure something out. Yeah. And as we were talking before this podcast with Ben, and it's still the hands, it's still the imagination. So choruses are choruses, and you just tweak knobs. I mean, that's so this tone in essence, that's the 80s, right? Or the Cordia. I mean, I can't really tell the difference. I mean, if we side by side, but when we were doing it, when I was a young kid, I didn't have anything to compare it to. It just was what it was. Yeah. So now, these are the tools that we have, and we make it sound like. And so, yes, you can do all this stuff in the box, and it sounds literally. But I'll say this, but it's this also, this guitar, this pickup configuration, and it's having, like, if you take out I'll just do the same. It's a cool sound, right? I played it a little bit louder, but
you can hear the filtering though of how it makes it glassy.
I mean, incremental, right? Yeah. But it all plays into it.
Sure. Well, it's all about stacking the deck, right,
Right.
in your favor, and
Right.
and doing the thing that gets the right sound. But no, that's absolutely gorgeous, and people should definitely check out Scuff and Mams. I'll have a link in the description, and I'll even I'll try to get Dan to give me some screenshots. So if you want to get the Soul Provider sound, you can tweak it just the way that he's got it here. And,
Yes.
you got your chorus on there, and you can be in the late 80s Michael Bolton Tone Town. So it'll
I loved your podcast with Michael Thompson.
oh yeah.
And like if you're like and I'm not I hate when I talk about that time period. I mean, names are going to keep coming up, right? So I'm not excluding anybody. The classic guitar players during that time was exhilarating, to say the least. I was never on par with Michael's knowledge and use of effects. I had a massive pedal board, I mean, it had just whatever, just all the stuff they threw into it at that time. I was not as enamored with effects. That it just wasn't in my nature. Just the same way I was not enamored with collecting guitars. You can be either, it doesn't matter. I mean, so then this is to the guitar players that subscribe to your podcast or listen to what you do. There's no set way of doing any of this stuff. I think, in my experience, whoever you are, lean into that, but always lean into what other people are doing. Learn from them. Pick out what you can learn. You were telling me something on text the other day about how the way Michael used that Boss vibrato pedal, right, on Latch. I had no idea even what that was until 2 days ago, and I'm going to use it on something. I mean, I won't use it as cool as Michael did, in your podcast with him. He's like he's a great player. I mean, great player, but he also has another gear where he's kind of like an artist with pedals, right? I remember when he came to Nashville, he played on a project for me. This is years ago, but the pedal board that he brought in, his philosophical view of that pedal board, it was another extension of his guitar playing, another gear that I just sat and just tell me about this, tell me about that. I picked up something from it. I never did it like him. But again, we lean into what we do. And for me, the funny thing about these songs that we're doing today is it still is part dedicated. Your subscribers, is that what we call people? Your
sure.
listeners, your viewers, I think a relevant question would be, well, it sounds like you use the same tone on a lot of this. Yeah, I did. That seemed to be the currency of that time, right? So I was keyed into that. It wasn't like this master plan. I went to work every day. Somebody called me, you want to play on this Michael Bolton session? Look at my little schedule. I didn't have iPhones back then. Yeah, that Thursday's wide open. I'm there. Get the gear there. And whatever came out. What happens next is somebody hears Soul Provider, as I think it was a big hit, right?
It's a huge hit. Yeah, I think I have here that it was 6 times platinum.
Okay, well then, that was his first big single, right, as a solo artist?
Yeah.
So,
I think the biggest single on that record. I think there's one other single, but yeah.
So how that works? I'm answering questions you haven't asked. Is that all right?
Go for it. Yeah, please.
So how that works then, in practicality, is somebody hears that record on the radio, either an artist or a producer or an A&R person, and they go, let's try to do something like that.
Yeah.
You don't have to copy it.
Give me the Huff.
Well, give me the component. Who are the components?
Yeah.
So somebody comes in and there's a song that's, interestingly enough, kind of like that song. Well, what do they want you to do? Well, if I brought in a Vox and I brought in a Gretsch and played something a little different, I didn't do that, by the way. I didn't even have that in my arsenal back then. But you get the idea. The idea is, there is, like any period of time, there's kind of a hit currency.
Right.
And during that time, this became part of that currency.
Right.
I was one of several who were doing that, but you build on that. So consequently, are there songs that are going to have a lot of that swirly, chorusy delay stuff?
I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I'm wondering if this might be an interesting time for us to transition into another mega hit. This one was 11 times platinum. Billboard's Hot 100 #1, which is the Michael Jackson song "I Just Can't Stop Loving You," a duet that he did with Saida Garrett.
Oh man,
do you remember much about working with Michael? I know you told me in the last interview that he would disguise himself, and you saw him in the bathroom, sort of taking off the costume.
Yeah.
Do you remember much about this song? I know I sent you the isolated guitar from the original recording, like listening back to that. Did it conjure any memories, thoughts, feelings?
Yeah, again, that was a tracking session too, which was the first time that I worked with him. So I mean, the first emotion, the first thought was just abject fear. Pick your poison, Michael Jackson or Quincy Jones, Bruce Swedien, the engineer. I mean, so I was old enough to know that I was in the deep waters. And if I'm not mistaken, Ndugu Chancellor was playing drums.
Yeah, Ndugu Chancellor, Paulino DaCosta percussion, Nathan East bass, David Paich playing synths, and then of course Saida Garrett doing the duet vocal. So
yeah, I mean, even when you say that, funny thing is, it's like, yeah, that's nerve-wracking to even to think about myself in that cluster of people. So any direction you want to go in there, but it was the same as any other session. Once you take that mystique and legendary status of all these people that were there. Was Robbie Buchanan not on that one also?
I didn't see him on that song. He might have been. It just had listed David Paich as being on synth.
Yeah, credits can be a little sketchy from that time.
I always thought it'd be like a Greg Fillinganes played on a bunch of those Michael Jackson songs from that era.
Something maybe you may be right. Maybe it was Greg. Either way, when you have that caliber of musician, the first thing you do is, I mean, you got to bring your A game. So you're listening to the music, and I don't know chronologically where this was.
This was 87, so this actually would have been before Soul Provider and probably recorded.
Okay, well then maybe the reverse is true. So whatever, you hear the song, and the object is not to stay out of the way, but it's to find small little, you can call them hooks, compositions that complement the song, that elevate the song. You find out what you can do with your instrument that is going to contribute to that. And if you want to talk about the art or the of being a studio player, that is really what it's about. It's, you get hired, you have longevity because of a consistency of bringing those elements to a song, no matter how large or how small your role is. And those are important facts, because sometimes you're called on to be the front line of the song, to be the main player. In this kind of song, and the same thing with the Michael Bolton song, it's more of a keyboard song. Yeah. It's not guitar music, right, per se. It's not about all these tone colors that you bring fast and flashy licks. It's about finding, I like to call them composition as opposed to hooks, but it's the same thing. You find those little earworms that you're not aware of, but without it wouldn't have the same bounce or same content. So on the Michael Jackson session, what I was listening for were little openings that I could insert some of these things. Mm-hmm. I did a lot of that thing where you volume chords, whammy them a little bit. Mm-hmm. So it was like, because the synth sounds were so dense back then, your sounds had to be
DX7s.
Oh,
that stuff,
I mean, but they would come in with racks of those things. Yeah. So part of my sound was also they would also take direct outputs with the same effects on them, so that they had it wasn't like a clean direct sound, but it was an affected direct sound. So it would put even that little extra sheen on top, and finding little small hooks that would complement that, and there you go. That's what it was. Now it sounds easy, and I don't think I remembered it as being hard, but it's harder than you think.
Absolutely.
When you look, and when I look back, it's not technically hard. A third grader can play these bits now. This is not that hard, but on the spot, that's kind of the difference. And so, you have to take a little credit for this.
Sure, the pressure's on, and I mean, I think two of the MVP parts, if I could be so bold as to say, there's a part in the chorus where there's like this ascending arpeggio that's going to double with the da, 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 da.
It was like this, and that's how I voiced it.
Yeah.
I mean, as opposed to this, for some reason, I can't remember what I don't remember exactly how that came in, but the idea was that somewhere in there, whether it was a conversation with anybody there, was that sound of it's almost a keyboard part. Mm-hmm. And that, I think it was just a guitar. When I listened back to it, it doesn't sound like a keyboard doing it.
Yeah, and then you do kind of like these swell things, and then there's like a rest, and then right before they say, and I just can't stop loving you, and then you come in with the big swell, and it's perfectly timed, and just the idea that's where you'd put the emphasis, like that separates session musician extraordinaire from somebody who is not quite there yet. It's like just knowing that you're going to observe that rest, and right before it comes in, you're going to kind of just come in right on the back part of that beat, and then just bring in that swell, and then that's going to carry over into the next verse.
And I'll just add a little piece on that. Some of it's intuitive, right? You just we probably, how many takes we did that, I have no idea. I don't remember overdubbing on that, so we must have gotten that pretty close. I probably flubbed something and had to punch in something. Knowing me, I was trying stuff all the time. But that wasn't like something where it was a track and then I got to sit down for hours with it. It was on the floor. So there is a little of that heightened kind of tension and that you have to get it right. And you play off also, like I would play off. You're constantly, what I've noticed, especially being on the other side of the glass now, I really like session players, it doesn't matter what instrument, who are constantly kind of fishing with their eyes, making sure that as if I'm the producer, right, that I'm on board with it. And I notice drummers will do this, guitar, but everybody, when they're playing, they're playing their parts and they're grooving, and then all of a sudden they'll kind of glance up just to kind of check out. They'll do it with the artist if the artist is there in a booth, if there are sight lines. And I'm sure that's what I was doing, kind of, because your job at that time is, it's not about you. That's the one thing. You have to be pretty selfless. You want to be that kind of person who is, they're hiring you for a purpose. So they want your input. So you have to be fearless enough to say, I'm going to try this. But whether they say it or you sense kind of a little bit of apathy, you have to be smart enough to know, maybe I need to try and go this way, zig or zag. So all that stuff was part and parcel of that session. And I can't say every take was the exact same, but some of those parts, and I can say this even without remembering it, you sense all of a sudden you've kind of landed that spot. So an important thing at that point is also to make sure that you remember that. It's not all about improvisation. Improvisation is really important, but I can't stress enough composition. Because once you find that little piece of the compositional pie, they're going to want to hear that again. So it's up to you to remember how to do that. So that's what happened on that song.
Yeah, and that's the best guys figure that out, and they create sort of little miniature hooks, you know, inside of using the words of Tom Bukovac. You got to have more hooks than a slaughterhouse. That's what he
tackle box.
Tackle box.
Yeah. He said slaughterhouse.
Yeah, he said
like Tom. Yeah.
I think I had said tackle box. He had said slaughterhouse.
There's Tom. we and the funny thing is we all look to those people that were our forebears, and so, I mean, I know it sounds like I got this man crush on Luke, but he was a master and a great rock guitar player. But listen to his rhythm playing; it was always compositional, and so that was the bar that was set. Yeah. So when I walked
human
in,
nature. I mean, just think of that.
Yeah. There you go. Enough said. You want to play this song?
Yeah, let's play it.
Okay.
Let's play it.
I hear your voice now. You are my choice now. The love you bring. Heaven's in my
right.
Oh my gosh. That's such a great part.
What I love is that you actually know the parts.
Yeah, I know the part.
That's very cool. That's very cool. And again, it's pretty. I mean, there's really. I mean, you know, you could on that thing on the, or you could. I'm not sure which one of those. I mean, you could obviously use either of those. Probably was a game time decision. A lot of the stuff that I mean, ended up making a lot of records. I guess at that point, I don't know how many people were doing a lot of this. All that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Again, it was a keyboard age, so that kind of stuff fit in with all that. And I tried to make hay while I could on that.
And was that neck and middle, or was that bridge and middle? A bridge and middle.
Yeah, tap the bridge and middle. Tap the humbucker, the single coil. Yeah. I mean, it's, to be quite honest, a lot of that stuff, there was so much direct mixed in, it's hard for me to be 100% sure. This seems like it's what it was.
Yeah, it's a definitely, it sounds right, you know, from a listener standpoint.
Yeah.
So.
It's really the chiminess of it is what is, you know, again, it's like I could do this 10 times and it would sound slightly different every time. But the idea is that, you know, you're trying to weave in and out of the keyboard sounds, especially this is a real keyboard song. And there's something I know we're gonna get into a Burt Bacharach song. I didn't know. You know, it's funny. I don't remember when this happened, but he had a term that I really learned a great deal from. Maybe we can do his song next if you want to, or whatever. It's your interview. I'm telling you what to do.
Yeah, we got it. Yeah.
But like on this song, right? You noticed. I did a window, whatever the lyrics are. I never learned lyrics. Burt Bacharach called that shadowing. I'd never heard the term.
In terms of shadowing the vocal with like outlining the arpeggio.
Shadowing the melody. Yeah. It just, and that, I mean, if you look at classical music, I mean, that's done all the time. Different instruments. It's an obvious thing. I didn't know the term. Maybe that's not the exact term, but the idea is that you find certain parts of a melody to accent, but you don't do the whole thing. You know, it's like it's not like when you're at church and the church pianist is reading, you know, basically playing all the parts and everybody's singing. You know, there's you find kind of how to bob and weave in there, and that was a big part, I think, of this song, especially in the verse. You know, that wasn't his melody, but on that all those little bits, I don't remember. I honestly don't remember if that was my idea to do that. If it was Quincy's, I have no idea. Probably was a little bit of both, or maybe I had played for Burt and I was very aware of it into that.
Yeah, he did it all the time. I'm thinking, just as you said that, I was thinking of the song, a Burt Bacharach song called "I'll Never Fall in Love Again." I think it was performed by Elvis Costello and covered by a bunch of people. Dionne Warwick, of course. Yeah, and like all that stuff in the that's got all that shadowing going on with the piano and stuff.
Masterful. Yeah. And again, that's another, if we're talking about hooks, right? It's another part, or composition. It's a way to accent, be a part, add a different sonic texture to something without distracting from the most important part of the song. In this case, it would be Michael Jackson's vocal.
Yeah, boy. Well, it's absolutely outstanding. I mean, it's a real treasure to hear you play it. You know, I secretly on the last interview, I wanted to include that. We just didn't have the time. So getting to hear it now, it's such a brilliant part, and just adore it to death. And as you said, I knew it backwards and forwards. I knew right where everything was going, because I've listened to it so many times and tried to pick out that piece, and then found that ISO guitar part that was really helpful in helping me figure out exactly what it was. But one thing that's incredibly important to note as far as how everything is hooked up today is the cables that we're using to go from guitar to pedal board to amp, or going from the pedal board directly into the DAW. We're using Mogami cables throughout. One of them I custom made for Dan, and the other one is pre-made, and then all of the mic cables that we're using today to capture the audio here are all Mogami cables, and they're the absolute best in the industry, made in Japan, and amazing stuff. And Mogami has actually said that they would give away 5 instrument leads, 10-foot straight to straight with Neutrik plugs. So if you're interested in getting one of those cables, the way that you enter to win that is going to be listed in the description. All you need to do is head over to Instagram. You're going to follow Dan, you're going to follow Vertex, and you're going to follow Mogami, and comment on any of the social media posts that we do collaboratively with Dan about this video. All you need to comment is Mogami in the comments, and that'll automatically enter you to win. Yeah, let's get into some Burt Bacharach then, if you don't mind. And it's probably through a portal that a lot of people don't know about. It's through Patti LaBelle. But this song was On My Own, and it was written and I think produced also by Burt Bacharach. Is that correct?
And Carol Bayer Sager, who he was married to at that time.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
And so this would have been, let's see what I got, 1986. So this would be before the earliest, I think, of any of the songs we've talked about so far.
Before this Michael Jackson song.
Yeah, so that was 87, or at least when it released. You know,
that makes sense, though. That makes sense because I mean, again, you I would say I had a scholarship to play at the most prestigious music college, which was the LA session scene at that time. So yeah, it was inevitable you would learn from one session and take it to the next.
Yeah.
And so I owe Burt quite a bit. I played on a bunch of songs for him during this time.
So what was his what was his vibe like relative to, let's say like another icon like Quincy Jones? Like what was the Burt Bacharach session typically like?
Well, the one difference is he was a songwriter on every song that he would do, at least that I played on. And so he came at it with such an intricate foreknowledge of the melody and of the song. And interesting thing about Burt Bacharach, when I remember this again, it was scored out pages of sheet music, right, with chord symbols, but a lot of melodies written. For this guitar player, that was not my strong suit, so I had to rely more on my ears, which didn't seem to bother him. He wasn't interested in whether you played it the first take right or not. But I noticed when you looked at his songs on the page, not as much on this Patti LaBelle song, but on other songs, I heard a quote about his. I think Burt told me this because I had mentioned something that digesting his music took me a while, and I think it took everybody a little while. Frank Sinatra said about Burt Bacharach that he wrote in hat sizes. Now, I'm not a hat guy, so I didn't really at first know what that meant. But what 4 3/8 or whatever. Are you a hat guy or no?
No.
Well, it's not like just the number.
I know 4. Somebody who is though.
Okay. 4. It's not just a number. It's like that and some
fraction,
some fraction on top of it. And so what he would do is if you listen to his music, he would write over bars. Like your phrase doesn't just start on beat 1 and end on beat 4 in the next phrase. So he would write like a phrase that would start maybe on the end of 2 and go through beat 3 of the next bar. And at first, if you see that, if you're not a great reader, it's so confusing. So what I had to do is just close my eyes and listen to the song. It always made sense. And
would you chart it then yourself with like notes from there to kind of say, okay, this is what's happening? Or would you just kind of have the memory to just kind of remember the form?
I was a memory guy, and it's always served me. I could read a little bit. I mean, enough to get me through some tense situations, but for me, the equation that always worked was just listen to the song, listen to what was being sung, and then again, just apply what I'm doing to that. Now, but Burt, the thing that I learned and picked up from him is that he would go, he would always go, Danny, hear the melody, shadow that, shadow. Okay, interesting. So again, that was one thing. It worked for Burt Bacharach. Well, then I guess it worked for Michael Jackson, on that song. And I would take that into other sessions, always being aware of that as a possibility in my part. And it informs a lot of things. It doesn't always work, but you can use that as part of your arsenal. And so on the Burt thing, Burt, interestingly enough, this is another song that was tracked.
So Patti LaBelle was there as well,
Yeah, she was there.
and
She
Michael
was,
McDonald as well.
Michael McDonald was not.
He was not.
No.
So did somebody have a scratch vocal for him, or was it just?
You know, that I don't remember. I don't.
I guess Burt could have done it because he could sing.
I don't even know that it was a duet at that time. I just recently listened to Michael McDonald's book on audio, right?
Right.
And he talked about that song. He never had met Patti even after he recorded that. He recorded that on a different
So they were
coast.
just siloed. But
They did their videos on different coasts. I didn't know that either. And he didn't meet her until they performed it one time live.
Wow.
But yeah, it's quite. I mean, Burt's writing was awesome. The way at the end of the song that they're singing the melodies, and then each one, it's not just ad libs. It was composed ad libs. So there were melodies within the ad libs that kept taking the thing up. That's how Burt worked. And he would usually book a whole day, meaning 2 sessions, meaning 6 hours, maybe from 12 to 6, right?
One song.
Just one song.
Yeah.
And it would be a stripped down, usually just a guitar player, keyboard, bass, and drums.
Right.
And that was it.
So that was Burt playing piano, and Greg Gaines, David Foster was playing.
He
synths, I don't know.
He wasn't. David wasn't there. I would have.
And then Neil Steubenhaus on bass, and then Carlos Vega drums.
Yeah.
The late great Carlos Vega.
Yeah. My thought was probably Greg was probably the session player. I don't know again, some of these memories are a little foggy for me. But I remembered, I think Mick Gazowski probably tracked it. He was a great mixing engineer. He would track Burt's sessions. So you would, in your headphones, in the control room, it sounded like a finished mix. It was so inspiring. And again, the level was so high. Burt would walk in and you were on your best behavior. I remember there was a Barbra Streisand tune one day. When you got a Burt Bacharach call, it was always going to be legendary artists singing. It was incredible.
How old do you think he was at that time? Because he was quite long lived for anyone, but he was probably got to be in his 60s or 70s even at that point, right?
You'd have to do the math. I mean, we could Google
Anyway,
it. So I was in my 20s. He was at least in his late 50s.
Okay.
I mean, he was remarkably fit and a handsome guy too. So it was hard to know.
Yeah, right.
Energy. It was infectious because he wrote these songs and he cared about them. It wasn't just a piece of business, and this was his art. And he was one of the American songbook writers. So yeah, it was built into the session. I mean, it feels, you get that emotional. I wish I had known in what I know now about his life when I was in my 20s. That's my only regret. But maybe I would have been too intimidated. So maybe my ignorance was a bit of an asset for me at that time.
Well, you want to play a little On My Own?
Yeah, but first I got to pee.
All right, let's do it.
Never should be spoken.
Love it.
I took a little bit of license. I just was thinking, I usually get my best thoughts when I'm relieving myself. Shadow Man. That should have been my nickname, right? Because there's a theme in all this stuff. In all these songs, there's a shadow of the melody. And I guess until you look retrospectively, I didn't realize that was such a big part of what I was doing or called on to do. But all of it makes sense now, right?
Mm.
You remember those little things, and it sets up even in the those little things. You're present, but you're not taken over. I'm going to use this on my next project.
Yeah. We have a lot to thank Burt Bacharach for.
Oh. Well, and it's funny. I also didn't. Here's a humorous side note of this. everything that I seemed to do in the 80s would either be full on distortion, right? Just blazing, or chorus beyond recognition, what I call it. I did that for about 2 decades. And then I would say starting in the year, 1998, I don't think I touched a chorus pedal until maybe 20 years later. I think I used it all up.
Yeah, I think by the time you were doing the Shania and Martina McBride stuff, it was definitely no chorus to be found on any of that. That was probably 96 or something like that.
No, all of a sudden, it's how something that was so prevalent and accepted and necessary was like just absolutely like, no, stay away from that. And now it's making a little comeback.
It's making a big comeback.
Yeah.
Chorus is back, and the detune and the pitch shift kind of stuff, and like what you were using SPX 90 or that sort of stuff for, that's all making a comeback.
Well, these young bands I'm hearing, I think they do the 80s better than the 80s. 1975, right?
Yeah, sure.
Do you know the guitar player in that band?
I don't know his name, but I know that
we should look him up. I mean, because he's great. I mean, it's just, and I also heard that I think Rich was telling me from Tyler. He was telling me that they're very keen on finding out, what we were using at that time. And I listened to some of their music, and I mean, they've taken it to another level as far as I'm concerned. That whole 80s thing, and it really bothers me that I don't know his name. That's horrible.
I'm sure we can look it up. And
that's just whatever.
Well, did you listen to the latest John Mayer record, Sob Rock? Because he tried to kind of recreate a lot of those like Lukather and Paul Jackson parts and a lot of the more 80s influenced songs. I don't know if you listened to it, but I
didn't even know it existed.
Okay, I'll share some of the songs with you, and you can have a listen, because I think you'd dig it. He's brought back a lot of that kind of like really clean, compressed comping and chorus and stuff like that. Even in the lead tone, in some cases, kind of more like Def Leppard-y, like.
I've heard of this guy. Yeah, he's probably going to have a decent career. This young John Mayhall, what's his name?
Yeah, Mayhall. Yeah,
freaking dude, man. What a guitar player.
Yeah.
No, I to be honest, I didn't know.
I'll play some for you. You can have a listen to it, see what you think. And Don is involved with all that stuff.
Of course,
it sounds really great. And he was involved with some stuff with some heavy chorus. Like, I don't know if you remember those Bonnie Raitt records that he produced. Like Nick of Time, has a lot of chorus on a lot of those. Were really cool. But man, I love everything about this song. It's absolutely wonderful.
Thank you. Thanks.
Well, I want to move to another song that's probably going to have the gainiest sounds that we're probably going to use today, and it's in a genre that we didn't really get to talk a whole lot about, and a lot of your fans in the Dan Huff Facebook group had talked about, is your work with Michael W. Smith.
Yeah.
And he was, especially in the 90s, just super prolific in Christian music, and you were all over, I think, the majority of those records. And the song that we're going to talk about is Cross of Gold, and it's got a really cool clean guitar part. It's got a really cool distorted guitar part and kind of solo section. The cleans almost remind me of like kind of Rockman-esque, or almost, I think what I share with you is that it has a lot of the processing sound that you would hear like Trevor Rabin on Yes, on Owner of a Lonely Heart or something like that, especially the part right after the solo where there's that clean arpeggio.
Well, it's in all the really B sections too.
Yeah. Absolutely amazing song, and I just love the variety that it presents. But I'm kind of curious if you could talk a little bit about working with Michael W. Smith in that song in particular. It's like a lot of just absolutely like amazing folks, and even I think your dad did string arrangements on that record.
I'm sure he did. He worked. He worked. Well, my contemporaries when I was growing up in Nashville, my dad was primarily at that time an orchestrator within Christian music, contemporary Christian music, which was really kind of in a somewhat of a Renaissance stage. It found itself. There were some great writers at that time, and also there was a. It sounds crass, but there's a commercial craving for maybe an alternate type of entertainment. People looking for comparable music, but with maybe a little different messaging, you know?
Yeah.
And so it gave a lot of space for people like Amy Grant, Michael Smith. DC Talk was massive at that time. And, I'm, of course, probably cutting out so many people that are great, but let's just say those were the big three at that time amongst the best. But I got to play on all their records. I think probably more because I'd moved out to the West Coast and they were using a lot of West Coast or mix and match bands. And I think I met Michael when we were both teenagers and he had come to Nashville. He was songwriting. And
He was like from Virginia or West Virginia.
West Virginia, yeah. And so I think I played on some of his demos, and then he immediately got a record deal, and he, he was going to use whoever the producer was wanting to use with the top Nashville session player. So I was not part of that. Moved, kind of made a name for myself, and then they reached out to me. So I started flying back from Los Angeles in the late 80s to record some with him. This was in the 90s.
This would have been, I think this was early 90s.
Yeah.
This was 1992.
Okay, so I was already back in Nashville playing sessions again.
And also had Bob Carlyle, which is interesting. The great singer, Butterfly Kisses was a huge hit that he had. But also just the fact that he was doing background vocals is
Who else was on this?
Let's see. So Nashville String Machine for strings. That was probably your dad was string arrangement and conductor.
Yeah,
and then Michael W. Smith on vocals and keyboard.
You got a band,
and I think that some of it was drum machine on some of that stuff.
Okay.
So some of that those were the credits that I could find.
Yeah, I wish I could. I mean, they used any and everybody. I mean, a lot of their guitar players. Jerry McPherson, I know, was a big part of those records too. Great guitar player here in Nashville, who I got a chance to play a lot of records with. Mike was a wonderful writer, and he was also a really good key. Well, he still is. So, but he, energy and an absolute hunger to make serious records. Those records. I mean, when I was kind of pleased that you had me research this one. That's a serious 80s record.
Yeah.
That's as good as anything I think we ever did.
Production wise, I think certainly for its year, it was as contemporary sounding as anything. Man. Even if the message was Christian leaning, I think it's still
I listened to lyrics. I remember him saying that too, because all of us in rock music, for some reason, part of our arsenal. I mean, the long hair and the earrings and all the. I don't think we were as much into the body ink at that point. That was coming a little bit later, but everybody was wearing crosses.
Sure.
And so like his question was, what's behind that?
Sure.
I thought it was a good lyric.
Yeah, he's got kind of his voiceover kind of moving into the solo, that's kind of his commentary on it. But yeah, great song. And do you remember like anything about the tracking? Like, do you remember your dad being there?
No. My dad would have done it as an overdub.
Okay.
It would have been just a rhythm section. And does it have the producer on this? I want to think it was John Patoker.
I'm sure we can probably look that up. I'm not sure. Ben, any ability to look up Cross of Gold for Michael W. Smith?
That'd be great. Because he had always really good producers. I mean, and I remember from Michael, I mean, we're friends. We don't see each other as much. He doesn't live.
Who we got?
Let's see. Production. Mark Heimerman produced.
Oh, well, there you go. Mark Heimerman. Can I talk about Mark Heimerman?
Yeah, let's talk about him.
I did a record with him, and the people that you just mentioned that followed some of my career in this genre. He produced the DC Talk Jesus Freak, that album, and I would say hands down that's one of the best records. I'd compare that record to any record I ever played on or heard. This guy is a musical monster, Mark Heimerman. He lives in Minnesota now, and one of my best buds. I don't even know why he moved to Minnesota to St. Paul or Minneapolis. Anyways, great music maker, but that guy. That makes sense. I'm going to call him up after this interview today because he's great. It makes total sense. He made a stunning record. But if you want to hear some cool, and there's a bunch of guitar players on the Jesus Freak record. As a matter of fact, I'm going to go listen back to it. That was one of the last things I think before I kind of transitioned into my production career. That was one of the last things I think I really played on, and it's as good as anything. But yeah, that's Mark's energy, he makes me look like I'm asleep, and so does Michael W. Smith. Those guys bounce off the walls. And yeah, now it all makes sense why that record sounds like it does.
Oh, well, you wanna play a little of it?
Yeah, you know what we should probably do? Why don't we split it into? It's going to take me a minute. I'll have to.
Yeah, we got the clean part and then the distortion part.
Would you like me to do the clean part first?
Whatever your workflow is, we're gonna follow. Whatever you think
it starts that. So we'll just cut.
So we're back. We've got the hit maker, Old Reliable here.
Yeah.
And we've set up into the REVV D40. And when we also are set up with a Little Walter 212 that had Celestion G1275s, I believe.
Exactly.
As verified with the photo that we'll put on screen. And a 421, and was it a Royer?
122. It has the tube in it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So again, did we talk about this? Did we talk about this before we rolled?
We talked about it before we rolled. Yeah. So let's rehash for everybody in here about. This isn't just stuff that we've plugged into at random. This is actually the gear that you used to record the record. You used this Strat, the REVV D40 amp, and that Little Walter 212 cabinet. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah. Right now I'm plugged into my new pedal that I love. By the way, just plug it. It's legit, man. This thing sounds. What? Tell us what that is, real quick.
That's the Ultraphonics Overdrive.
Sounds great to me. I would have used it on the record. I would have. I mean, I'm not joking. I really like this. So it's fit the spot. When I started doing what became this record. By the way, you asked me if I'd like to talk about this. I'm really not that interested in it. So I'm gonna have to.
We're gonna get you hyped. I'm gonna be your hype man for the record.
This has renewed my love affair with music. Period. I've been doing this since I was 18, and I'm 39, so you can do the math. 64. And I was either, you didn't ask me this, but I'm going to just tell it. So because it's going to set up the gear and all this stuff. I've said this before, so it's a repeat, but I was either challenged or shamed into doing this. Since I had that band Giant in the late 80s, some expressive guitar playing, and I really found a joy in making music as a guitar player. And then I started what I call my day gig, which is producing. So how that happened, that's irrelevant to this discussion. I haven't really been seriously playing the guitar like I did during the period that we just went through, going on 20 some odd years now. That's a long time not to have a guitar in your hand every day for 8 to 10 hours. Little degradation of the chops and all that kind of stuff. Not necessarily a bad thing, but suffice it to say, my hands didn't feel like my hands anymore. So, two main characters in this, and they're not the only characters, but the two main characters that really pushed my buttons last year to plant this seed that I need to do something on that basically is my creativity, right? Tom Bukovac, well, great guitar player, dear friend, great podcaster, everything about the guy. He's a great session guitar player. I have benefited from that, hiring him so many times through my career, and he's made my career. I can't do a Tom Bukovac, but I can kind of go there. You should do something. It's like, yeah, Tom, I don't know, the time's passed. Dude, trust me. So you get that. Anybody who watches Uncle Larry,
yeah.
So
homeschooling,
and then my dear friend who is a songwriter extraordinary. He's a Hall of Fame songwriter, ex-NFL defensive lineman, Mike Reed, who's I can't say enough about my relationship with Mike. We mostly talk about anything but music in our talks, but music always enters because he's a lifer too. And he said the same thing. So anyway, those two people and basically encouraged, and Mike was more the shamer. You're just like, come on, you chicken shit. So and there was some truth in it. I was a chicken shit because I hadn't been playing. And so last July or late June, whatever it was, Derek, who reps Rev, came over to my house and said, will you try this 41 amp? Yeah, great. He left me one. And I said, I'll try it. I'm do some writing or whatever. So I just put it right there. It hasn't moved actually from that spot. and I plugged it into an open back cabinet here that you mentioned the specs on it. And normally my arsenal is a big 412 and another amp locker here at the house. My Bogner amp, and that's my solo go-to with all the heavy drive. It's great, my matchless. But I thought, well, this is a great time. I'm going to write some songs. And I just plugged this guy in, picked the closest spot, which is a vocal booth right here. And I started with my blue Stratocaster, which is I think it's a 59 reissue. Mm-hmm. You can look that up. Love the guitar. It has a nice spanky kind of tone to it. It doesn't have a humbucker in it, but I didn't care about that. I just wanted that sound of frets and string, so I didn't use, I basically had this Supermoon pedal, which was a gift Keith Urban gave me because of a song that we did together. And I loved the sound of
this is a Mr. Black Supermoon reverb. Yep. For those who want to know.
Basically plugged it into that Rev and just cranked the Rev. I just kind of find out what both channels would do. And I got some drum loops and just started writing songs. They came together just bit by bit. I just would react to a groove, play maybe a rhythm part, or a melody would come to mind. And I just started recording it, and little bit by little bit. The demos didn't have any other instruments other than the drum groove and the guitar part, possibly a secondary part if there was a rhythm part. No bass, nothing like that. The idea I was going to re-record all that stuff. All of a sudden I thought, well, shoot, I should play some solos, give myself an indication of how this song is constructed, right? So if the amp didn't have quite enough giddy up and go for some of the more rock things that I was playing, I grabbed this out of my closet, the dual overdrive SD2.
The Boss, yeah. Boss. And this was something that Tom Bukovac used to use for many years. Used to be a staple on his board.
That's probably where I got it then. I mean, who knows? There's a whole closet full of pedals. It's just the stuff kind of comes and goes. The knobs are all wiggly on it. It's kind of held together by some chewing gum. But I figured out which setting I liked on it. And I just started recording. That was it. I mean, it literally started, didn't even have this little pedal board here. And that's what constituted the beginning. And in the end, the majority of the record. I ended up grabbing this guitar because, as I said, the blue Strat doesn't have a humbucker. And all of a sudden, it was like when I started playing, a lot of the guitars I've been playing over the last 20 years, when I would play on my projects, didn't have a whammy bar. Nothing. It just wasn't the style of music I was doing. So I got used to playing without it, got used to playing without pedals. I became a totally different musician in the years that I produced music. And I'm really grateful for that because it broadened my horizon, But when it came to expressing myself, kind of who I am, all of a sudden, it's like I sort of wanted to kind of grab for that thing a little bit. It's not the Floyd, it's not the big dive bombs, but it's just, who amongst us guitar players has not been touched by Jeff Beck in some way? So again, not wanting to copy it. As I started writing, you didn't ask me these questions, but I'm just going to go.
Please.
And again, I have no enthusiasm because this was a complete slog for me. No, this is the best thing I've done for myself in a lot of ways. But I realized that I'd been ignoring kind of who I was as a guitar player. More importantly, why I got into the music business. I love playing the guitar, and it's not a job; it's a hobby. It's the perfect job description because you never arrive at your destination. There's always something to become better at. So that's how this thing started. All of a sudden, I got rekindled my relationship with this piece of wood here. And then it became the main instrument. I think I may have used that Jazz Master on one song. I used the Les Paul on one melody because there was some double stops that it's when you do the double stops, those type of things, they always go a little bit flat because the
tremolo.
Yeah, the tremolo. So consequently, I had to use the Les Paul on that one song. But for the most part, I wasn't thinking about gear. My idea was that I'll deal with that later. So I was telling Ben this before we started this podcast. That was probably the smartest thing that I did. I deferred the idea of equipment, sound, everything. It was only just about a melody and expression. So it wasn't intentional. This was the greatest mistake that I ever made. And I cut down on my options. So again, everything, as opposed to thinking, okay, should I use this distortion pedal, this delay? I wasn't thinking that. I had whatever, the crayon box with 8 crayons. That was it. I didn't have any other colors. So I only thought about music. And what happened is I wrote a song, listened to it on my phone the next day at my little demo, and I thought, I like that. Day or two later, I started writing another song. It happened. I wrote 10 songs. And then what happened after that was I thought, okay, I'll defer again. My demos sound pretty good. The playing was pretty good. It wasn't perfect, but there was a rawness to it that felt very true to me. And I wouldn't describe myself as a raw guitar player. I don't even know how I describe myself, but it felt like I was piercing something inside. It felt like there was a tension. It felt like it wasn't perfect, but I felt a personality emerging, which, being a studio player, that's scary because you're not called for your personality. And all of a sudden I started hearing myself in this. All the songs that I wrote, I decided that I was going to, I even said this in the album credits, because the vinyl is coming out. So I actually have credits and all this kind of stuff. I said something to the effect of this was kind of a love letter to my years of emerging as a musician, the music that I listened to. So everything was kind of peripheral, like you can say, tip of the cap or whatever, a nod to. But I can point, and anybody that grew up on music I grew up will hear those influences. I mean, you can't sidestep those things. That's who I am.
Yeah, Slow Dance to Goodbye is where I really hear the Jeff Beck thing. It's
just the way he shapes melodies and everything. He's so much a part of my love for the guitar, equally with Larry Carlton, equally with Al Di Meola, Elegant Gypsy, Larry Carlton, Room 335. I mean, Asia by Steely Dan, Lee Ritenour, Captain's Journey, Jeff Beck, Blow by Blow, Wired, which is what I wanted this setting for this record to be. Small drums, not bombastic. I didn't want to make a rock record, although there's some rock overtones to this thing. It's not jazz. It's just melodies. Steve Lukather, no doubt. All of my contemporaries, everybody's filtered in my playing, but specifically when I was between the ages of 14 and 19, these were the people that Steve Morse, Dixie Dregs. They constitute Joe. I'm gonna keep remembering Joe Walsh, the So What record. All these things shaped everything that I am as a musician, and so all these compositions were echoes of that thing. And I just started loving the way my fingers felt on the guitar, and one thing preceded. So going back to my long-winded explanation, I felt good enough about the demo, so I took him into the studio to put bass and drums on. My original intention was to use a number of my friends playing on this record. When we got in the studio, Jerry Rowe and Mark Hill, Mark played bass, Jerry drummer. They listened to the demos. They knew it. They knew the songs even before I got to the studio, which was overwhelming to me. They really cared about it. We pretty much tracked the whole record with them playing to my demos in 2 days.
Wow.
Staggering.
Wow.
So you get all this reaction to your record. These guys they honored the grooves, but they brought their personalities and their own composition to it. The idea then was I'm going to come back in and get all this stuff and circle the wagons and really play the shit out of this thing now. And once I started doing that, I realized that it didn't have the essence. So that was a bit tough at first because I thought, what am I going to do? Because some of this stuff there's some ratty shit in here. And there's too much.
Says you.
And there's too much reverb on some of these parts. And it was that pedal. It was printed. I couldn't even control that.
And not really, and if this is cranked, reverb in front of a cranked amp is generally not, the way that you would do it, and it definitely makes the reverb more intensified for sure.
And then I remember what my dear friend, collaborator, guy that I grew up with in the music industry, Keith Urban, said one time I told him about that. He gave me that pedal. And when we were recording a song called Blue Ain't Your Color, it was a big song for him. His great chank parts, whatever. Keith was not a studio guitar player. So when he turns on an effect, he turns it on. It's not like this delicate little, little inch. He just turns the thing on and let it rip. And I said something, that's a lot of reverb. He goes, yeah, it's great, ain't it? Whatever, his Aussie accent. And that stuck with me. And I thought, okay, instead of being fearful of this stuff, why don't I lean into that? Okay, so there's too much reverb on some of these songs. Well, that's a thing, right? Nobody knows that I didn't intend to do that. Everybody's going to hear it and go, yeah, he meant to do that.
He's being contemporary, like all those youngsters playing minor 9 hammer-ons.
There you go. Whatever.
You didn't do that, but no, it's great. I love it. If you hadn't told me that, I'd have no sense that it wasn't intentional. And I actually assumed that it was in the loop because it didn't sound competing to me. I mean, sometimes that's the risk you run with going with processing effects before a distorted amp, is that it feels like it's fighting the guitar tone, but it doesn't sound like that at all. It all sounds very intentional and deliberate.
Then we also the idea was not to put too much on this record. There's a lot of space on here. There's a little bit of keyboards, but in essence, it's still bass, drums, and guitar. Maybe a secondary guitar part on some of these songs.
Fiddle every once in a while, and you got Paul Franklin, right, playing some steel guitar on there.
Well, that was the other. At first, I thought maybe I would do, I have obviously a lot of friends who are great guitarists, and then I thought, well, if I'm going to do something, it's the only thing I've ever done, and maybe the only thing I ever do. Maybe I should concentrate on presenting me as the guitar player. But I still, there were a couple songs that I felt like, I had my dear friend and great string arranger, Chris Wilkinson, do 2 songs because I loved Claire Fisher's writing on the Prince records, great jazz pianist and jazz artist. I asked her if she could channel a little bit of that, and she did. And
she's like Waiting on a Whisper is one of them.
Yes,
it's a really
more on the Runaway Gypsy Train. But
Was that an Al Di Meola reference?
there you go. I mean, it's all in the titles, and then Gordon Mote came in and played a little B3 and a little piano. But just again, the idea was to keep this record as sparse. For somebody who likes to throw the kitchen sink in, I tried not to. Hence, all of a sudden, there's room for this too much spring reverb or whatever. You notice the guitars are pretty loud. It's like that was my dearest friend and collaborator, Justin Niebank, actually recorded the record for me. He's one of the greatest mixing engineers, and he was way in. So he came and recorded it. We did it at a little studio down the street called The Castle, really dry sounds. And then when it came time to mix, he said, let me shape the sounds. But he said, you mix the guitars. He said, because he said, and he didn't say I'm going to bury him. He said, but nobody's going to turn them up as loud as you. And it's your record, so do what you want. So that's the basis for this thing. But I found out about it as I was going. All my intentions, other than maybe the intention of keeping it as sparse as I could, I didn't find out until I found out. It was exploration. So you can probably tell by how fast I'm talking and animated. It totally woke me up from any kind of lethargy or, kind of being jaded by doing music every day of my life for 40 plus years. This was something new for me because there were no rules. I don't have to compete. I don't have to sell this thing. I paid for it too. So that was the nice thing. I decided to also go with an independent label here, Baked Alaska, which
is what Tom Bukovac is involved with that, right?
Joe Glazer, yes, Josh Rawlings, and Tom talked me into that. I had some friends that were so gracious at some major labels to say they were interested in putting it out, but I felt this record needs to be exposed to guitar players who want to hear this stuff. I mean, this is not me trying for another career, and it from a commercial standpoint. I mean, I want people to want this thing, and hopefully they'll like it. We're putting it out in vinyl and CD at first, which I'm excited again because it harkens a little bit to something that I hold very dear. It's not the only way to get music, but it's a nice way. So anyway, I think that leads us back to this thing. My big discovery was when you let music lead you and you're not, well, I'm always fearful. So if you don't let your fear dictate where you're going, it can take you some places you never thought. Hence why maybe a lot of the things that you're unearthing with all the guitar players you're talking to, most of us were doing this when we were extremely young. We didn't know the rules then, right? 20s, 30s, but we're all looking back on it. But as I'm looking at it, we didn't know what we were doing. And it was just this kind of this daily mystery unfolding. I experienced a little of that in my studio right here. So I'm exhausted now. Let's talk about something else.
Well, I'm wondering if we can get you to play a little excerpt of some of the tunes and maybe even listen to some of them, not giving too much away. We want folks to go out and check it out. And again, by the time this releases, the album will be out. And so we will have links to that where people can go to purchase it. And you can either purchase the CD version, you can purchase the vinyl.
I think they have a direct digital download.
Will
you put the Baked Alaska website?
We'll get all the appropriate links all together prior to the release of the videos, so that we have people going to the place that's most beneficial to the record label and to you as the artist. And one thing I should mention too, Dan, I don't know if I told you this already, but we mentioned about earlier that Tyler was going to be giving away a guitar.
Right.
But actually Rev is also going to give away a D40 because it turned out that you used one throughout the record.
98% of this record, yeah.
So it's actually not going to be two independent giveaways. It is a one giveaway thing. You're going to win not only the Tyler that has the exact same pickup configuration, everything that your guitar has, but also the D40. So you can have the combo of the gear that was used for the record, and that'll all be part of the same giveaway, which I think is absolutely amazing. Somebody's going to be really happy to basically be able to plug in, and this has even capabilities that you didn't use, where you can go direct out from it and have cap sims and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So some really impressive stuff, and so we're appreciative of that to Rev and Tyler, and again, all those details will be here on screen with a link where you can go and you can register. It's basically just entering your email, and that automatically enters you to win, and we'll choose a winner 4 weeks after the video goes live. But let's get into playing a little bit. So are we going to start with Colorado Creepin? Colorado Creepin first?
Colorado Creepin. This was up until I had to think of titles, which was the absolute hardest part of this record. This was called Song Number 1. And it's funny because I didn't sequence the record. Tom Bukovac told me at the end of it, I sent him my rough mixes, and he said, it was funny, he goes, is this the sequence? Now, it was just code for this isn't the sequence, right? And I said, well, I knew what he meant by what he didn't say. I said, Tom, you want to sequence it? He said, I just experienced this on my new record with Guthrie. He said, I'd let somebody else do it. He said, you should let somebody else because you can't hear your music really for what it is. So I try to sequence. My daughter Ashley ended up doing the artwork, which is really good on the record. It was so nice to she wanted to do that. I had Chris Donegan, who I love his guitar playing. I use him so much on records also. He heard it, and I said, Chris, sequence it. And he sequenced it, and I thought, that's really cool. But there was something about it that didn't quite, it was great. There's no right or wrong here, but I thought, you know what? Justin Niebank was mixing the record, and he told me, he said, this song needs to be number 1. And I had placed this song, number 7 or 8, something like that. He said, no, you need something where you kind of gives you a little purview of the whole record, but it's not the main course. I started with something a little bit more flashy or something, whatever. And it resonated. I said, well, you sequence the record, Justin. And he did. I only changed 2 songs at the very end. And Justin, I guess the reason why is he grew up the same time period. So he understood it intuitively. He didn't know that. That's just what he said. So this is song number 1. And then song number 2, I just titled them song number 1 as I wrote them. Song number 1, and it ended up being song number 1, Colorado Creepin. And then song number 2, it's called
Waiting on a Whisper.
Waiting on a Whisper. Yeah, I'm bad about titles. It ended up being number 2. I can't remember how it formulated itself, but I thought it was kind of ironic that they ended up number 1 and number 2 because they were always number 1 and number 2. So what I could do, I mean, I don't have a click before this thing, so it's just going to start. I'll play a little bit with it. Okay. I mean, and just to give your listeners just a sense of what it is. I mean, maybe I'll just let it go for just a second.
Sure.
There's a. I don't have my wah-wah pedal for the part that's the. Anyway, that bit, I'm going to play along, but you're going to hear the wah-wah in there. So anyway, just here's how it starts. And this was literally the beginning. I had this drum groove, and that's the very first note that I played, and I just liked the way it sounded. So that stuck.
That pedal does sound good.
It sounds freaking great. I mean, it's going to, the funny thing about it is, look at it. I mean, the great thing about doing Mason's podcast is he comes with gifts. He brings all these pedals. I mean, there's 2 or 3 over here that he brought that I'm going to be trying out throughout the next week.
This is our way to just inundate to get shameless plugs in real time during the.
Well, in truth, I plugged it in and loved it. You just dimed the thing, and it sounds great. It's the perfect pre-saturation on the clean channel. That sounds great, just even with the. I love that.
Well, you make it sound really good.
I mean, so, and then the cool thing is you could yeah, the treble. I think it sounds even great with 2 pedals on it. But that's just the SD. But yeah, that's going to be a keeper for me. So anyway, here it goes. This is Colorado Creepin. This song felt like Creepin of some sort, but it always felt a little bit like a peeping Tom. It was the wrong kind of creeping. There's something about the that was the first thing that came to mind.
And also, if somebody wants to tempt this to some sort of film,
there you go. No,
a horror film.
But my daughter, my oldest daughter, I have 3 kids. 2 of them live here in Nashville, which I'm grateful for. My oldest daughter married a wonderful my son-in-law Marcus Blue, but she's never coming back. She's up in the mountains.
Yeah.
So there had to be something about Colorado Creepin, and I like it's alliteration, right?
Yeah.
Colorado Creepin. So this is Colorado Creepin. I'll play along with myself in a second. Let's see if it. That's how it started. Just. Oh, you're good. You get the idea.
Love it. All right.
Can I play you one cool lick on it? I'm not going to play the whole solo. And I had to actually figure out this lick. I'm going to go to the solo, the end of the solo. Let me give away one little thing here.
One little lick.
Here's the end of I'm really proud of this. A little My Giant Days in that one.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, I'm really proud of the way this song kind of takes you in to at the heart of what I do. I love ballads.
And there's a lot of them on this.
4, 4 out of the
40%.
40%, and it goes to my when we played in Giant, we would play. Tell me the title. I can't. This is so embarrassing. The Stevie Wonder song, one of the greatest guitar ballads of all time. For whoever answers this can win the amp.
Because we've ended as lovers. Yeah.
Thank you. Great there. Yeah, we played that song as a cover.
Yeah,
and I find that
a lot of people don't know that. In fact, they just think it's Jeff Beck.
Yeah. Stevie Wonder wrote it.
Yeah.
I find my deepest expression is in ballads.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just because I'm slow, but there's something about ballads. And this song, as you said, this one has Waiting on a Whisper. it felt like that. It starts quiet. I mean, it's quiet. The guitar has some really sloppiness to it. I'll say that about it at the beginning. And I left it because when I played it more cleanly at the beginning, I don't mean sloppy like muffed notes. I just mean like I turned the amp way up so you can hear the hiss and you can hear the overtones ringing against the chords. And again, that was something that I learned as a producer, not as a guitar player. I'm going to give more credit to Keith Urban. He always invited stuff like that, and it was his punk rock roots. You know, he's a Hall of Fame country artist, but his roots were in punk rock, punk rock and traditional country. But his whole thing, he got me hearing the idea of don't try to make it so perfect. Let the loose edges happen. Let it feel like it's going to possibly derail off the track, because that's where you get your tension in your music. So I learned that, it took me only 40, 50 years to learn that. But I'll pop that one up here. And I can play. Let me play it, and I'll play a little melody. Yeah. But there's something about it. The overtones against that fretless.
So good. Is that guitar?
Yeah. Actually, the beginning was the blue one, and then this one. You can hear the fur, right?
Might be my favorite song on this record.
Let's try this one. Very clean. I mean, it's not a lot of distortion.
The sensibility has it,
which is not normal for me. I usually put too much. You get the idea.
Yeah, but I love that movement. It almost has like a processional sort of feel to it.
Yeah. Yeah. That, and as the song develops, I mean, everything sounds like a promotion, so I'll just let that go. But these are stories, each one of these things. So what felt true to me was that, when you're telling a story, first you got to set the mood. You have to introduce the characters. And for me, as a guitar player, like right now, like if I were playing this live, I'd probably use too much distortion in the beginning. You can't hear it through the mics, but you can hear it through the room. Maybe I'd turn it down here. But on the recording, when I was doing it, and the reason I let it sit is because it really exposes the sound of the strings. You can hear my finger on the fretboard. It feels just a little bit uncomfortable to me when I hear it back. It's almost like too clean. But when I went back and listened to some Jeff Beck records that I loved, I also noticed that he did that same thing.
Yeah.
Mine was a little more, it was unintentional, but or maybe it was totally subconscious. But there's something by the end of the song, and there's some ripping stuff on this. Not just flash, but there's some chops by the end of the song, but it hits an arc, and there's some peaks and valleys, and by the time it gets into the second half of the solo, it's got a lot of, I wouldn't say my 80s, it's more my 70s rock, but it feels, if this thing feels like a narrative, then I was fine with it. And the same thing happened on this track. The drums are not big, as you notice. There's very little room sounds in all these on all these songs. It's just Jerry was very satisfied to play to that because he loves that too. The irony is he has a metal band, Friendship Commanders.
Wow.
His wife, which is just, I mean, it's not screamo, but it is. We're talking blistering, face blistering metal music, and then he's contentious to play it like inside.
Yeah.
So it really brings out that side, and it's what I guess I love most about playing the guitar. I want to hear anybody's personality, and I include myself in that.
Wow. Well, are there other songs that you want to talk about from this, or we want to save that for the?
Let me see.
I also had on there. We had Dixie Jive, Southern Synchronicity, Slow Dance to Goodbye, When Words Aren't Enough. Any of those that you want to talk about, or do you want to save those for the listeners?
I'll talk about one. I won't play it just because it's funny. And then I'll play you a little bit of. There's a song that's. It's a Southern Synchronicity, and that's one I had. That was the one, ironically, that Tom thought should be first on the record. So it's kind of nice. I mean, everybody has their favorites. Here, I'll go to that one next.
And that's got fiddle on it as well, right?
That's something. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned
that's Stuart Duncan,
one of the greatest bluegrass fiddle players, and let's see here, Southern Synchronicity. Yeah. So it's not something, to me, there is something Andy Summers about the main riff.
Well, you guys hear the message in a bottle kind of.
There's something about it, whatever that, and I dialed a little bit of
the Synchronicity.
Well, then Stuart, arguably one of the greatest fiddle players. And so there had to be some Southernality. Hell, I live in Nashville. So,
and Stuart, I think is he Virginia?
I don't know where Stuart comes from. He lives here, but but I like the pairings of things that aren't supposed to go together.
Yeah,
and when I love the dregs, I loved the Mahavishnu type violin, right? Well, Stuart is, I mean, his touch, his intonation are impeccable, but he's a fiddle player. He plays. He's reckless. Oh, he's like Angus Young playing bluegrass music.
Right.
I mean, to watch him is so. But I like the tension because you would not know. I'll play just 2 seconds of this. 7, 8 here and there, right? Dance to this one. Originally, I played this melody with the guitar, and it's still in there. Right? Idea. It's kind of an interesting little head. I'll let it run here. I'm not going to play my solo because I want to save that.
Okay, all right.
But Stuart did the first solo, and I'm going to play a little of his solo, which is ridiculous.
Where he kind of starts out with it really like.
Listen to this. I had to bring my game because this solo is so damn good. Come on, Stuart. Anyway, I'm not going to play the whole thing, but suffice it to say, when he did his solo, I thought, "Oh God, it's supposed to be a guitar record. I got it." I was satisfied. But the same thing, and I won't play all these, but Paul Franklin had the
Sure.
same thing. There was a song that I originally thought
He's Slow Dance Goodbye to Goodbye.
Slow Dance to Goodbye. Originally I was going to have him on the song.
Was that, we were in this argument in the car, was that nylon string that you're playing in the opening, or is that steel string?
There was steel string, and then even that little bossa nova part.
Yeah, I have it right here on my notes just to prove it that wasn't BS. I said also Joe Beam S.
Yes. I originally wrote that. It was that part was on a acoustic, and then I changed it to gut. It just didn't sound as good. I don't think my acoustic tuned. I think that's the reason why I changed. But
so you did end up going with gut strings.
I did, yeah.
Okay.
And the same thing with Paul. I was going to have him play on the Dixie Jive song, which is more of Dixie Dregs, and double my melodies. Well, while I was waiting for him, Paul was out touring, and I did all the parts, all the harmony parts. So it was like it sounded good to me. So it was done. So there's no point of redoing it. And so I was thinking, what could I have him on? And there was this little George Harrison-esque slide part that I played.
Yeah, they have that on there. Also showing you my notes. See,
Yes.
158 has some George Harrison feel. That section like a what's it, My Sweet Lord?
Totally.
Yeah.
And I actually played it on slide myself.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what? But I just want a different timbre to this thing. And plus, again, it's like normally you wouldn't think of steel guitar playing on a song.
It's really creative. I really dig it.
Oh man, his solo, his melody playing and his solo, the same thing. It's like Stewart and he just brought such an A game to this thing. Paul stayed here, sat right here, and just, he cares about every note, every inflection, and was willing to sit there all day and just keep playing and playing. Anything he played was great, but he was after this something, and he was so. What really moved me is how proud he was of what he did, and so and I thought, one thing you wouldn't normally think of a record that's maybe you would call this kind of fusion-ish. I don't know. It's not jazz. It's not rock. It's somewhere in the middle of all that stuff. This whole record, but the instruments you wouldn't think would be on the record would be a steel guitar or a fiddle. But I live in Nashville, and I really wanted. I just wanted some of that infusion, and it's only in 2 songs.
I think it's appropriate, though. I think a lot of people maybe don't realize, or at least when I have conversations about you and your music, I think a lot of people always associate you with LA, or they think that you're like from LA or something like that, and you're from here. I'm from here. You moved to LA for a time, and then you came back, and so I don't know. I feel like the arc of the album is sort of reflective of all these different places that you've lived and the influences thereof.
I've been. I mean, I didn't know it. I mean, if somebody would have told me when I was young, living in LA, that I would be known as a country music producer, I don't know how I would have reacted. I wouldn't have been able to conceive of that. And all I can say is my years back in Nashville, post LA, post a band that was a great teacher to me, that I would absorb and learn so much more about music that I didn't know existed through Nashville. And so I'm extremely proud. All these musicians work in Nashville. Again, this is not excluding. I mean, I have so many friends and collaborators that all could have been a part of this, but I had to jump in somehow. And I'm very proud that this music is. I wouldn't call it Nashville music. I mean, you've heard it, but it's saturated with my experience here, and we did it all here.
Yeah.
And I forgot to mention Eric Darkin, great percussionist, played on this record too. So I'm grateful for that. And it also, all this has informed the way I play the guitar now. I mean, I'm grabbing from the days that you're mining. All of that, maybe save the chorus pedal, but it's all part of it. And it's just kind of that package. And we can end on this. We don't have to talk about it ad nauseum. People will seek this out if they want to, but I had to write one song for my wife, Sherry.
Yeah. Which is the title track. Yeah.
Well, that ended up, I couldn't, she's, there's a lot of words that describe Sherry, but in essence, words don't ultimately describe someone you've been with literally since you were 13 years old. We've lived many lifetimes together, and she continues to amaze me, the depth and all that stuff. And so I thought, well, yeah, when words aren't enough, that's a great way to say it. It's like a melody. I would never try to write a lyric about the girl. She'd rather have me sing a song, but that's not going to happen. So anyway, so I wrote a song for her. You know, the song that you heard, that's the that song. I ended up playing that on gut string, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I played it for her, and then she listened to it, and now Sherry loves pop music, you know, and she listens to it, and she goes, "Yeah, I like that." And again, code. If somebody's not effusive, she liked it, and I said, "Well, yeah, because it gets into some changes on that song, you know," and I said, it just kind of bespeaks the complexity of your personality. You know, I'm fishing for, you know, and she said, I know, I really like it. And I'm going, oh, great. You know, I wrote a song for my wife, and she kind of is tepid in her response. She liked it. Anyway, so there's this very, I would call it, steeped in the heart of 1970s, the little 6/8 song. She heard that, and she said, what about that song? I like that song. I said, well, you can have any song you want, Sherry.
Yeah.
And so she said, well, I like that one. She said, can I have both? I said,
She wanted like a Chicago ballad or like an Ambrosia.
no, well, it was more Ambrosia, right?
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard that deep into there. He said, it's the last song. And that was another thing too. I thought it has to be a place of prominence. And I ended up calling the record that because for an instrumental record, that seems to make sense. When words aren't enough, you just play, right? She said, can I have two? No, come on. You get one song in a record. So anyway, but that one, and I absolutely love that song. It is so simple, just 4-piece, just a melody. And the same thing on that. It was just literally the first pass or so of that song with the intention of redoing it. And I can't phrase it better than that. Well, it sounds kind of self-serving, but it really is what it is. So, you know,
It's a beautiful song.
yeah, I'm happy with the whole record, and thank you for letting me talk about this.
Dan, really, like, you just thank you for everything that you've done for music and that you've done for production. I mean, your fingerprints are all over the sound of country music and kind of the way that we've come to understand and hear it now. I mean, I think between you and Mr. Bright, you know, it's kind of like you are the guys that have really had your fingers on you know, everything and has really shaped the sound. And you know, the music that I grew up on, that my parents were listening to, you were all over that. That's how I first, you know, discovered who you were. We had a lot of records in the house and cassette tapes, and I would go through and look at the names and, you know, try to, you know, find Hal Leonard books that I could take to my guitar teachers to teach me how to play. Of course, we didn't have this level of detail, and we didn't have any ability to get ISO tracks to figure it out. But it's just such an honor to be invited back and to get to experience this next to you. And if you can't tell from my face, from a viewer, you know, that it's just kind of like the closest I can put myself to being in the session with you is to sit next to you and hear you play some of the stuff. And the new album is absolutely stellar. And I think any guitar player is gonna love this. And I you know, will do everything that I can to get it out to the fans. And if they're not already reached by all the different ways that they find you. But before I complete today, speaking back to the Dan Huff fans, there is a large contingency on Facebook that has a fan group. And I had teased out that we would be here. And I wanted to try to get at least some questions answered that they've been dying to know about.
Fire away.
And so I've written down the 10 questions in those that asked them. And I apologize to those in the group if I didn't ask your question or we didn't feature the song that you had mentioned, because I got some feedback from them as well and some of the song selection that we ended up using today for some of the 80s and 90s pop songs that we chose. So the first question is from Ethan. And he asks, what is your desert island guitar rig? If you had to, now there, as Tom Bukovac often points out, there's no power on a desert island. But what is your desert island rig if you had to choose? Let's maybe restrict it to guitar, an amplifier, and a pedal of some kind.
Wow, boy, that's. I think now. It's funny, you know. It's like I love playing a Strat. I love this Strat. Obviously, I've talked enough about how I love the remake, the new version 2.0. So it would either be that. Can I have an either or?
Yeah, sure. Why
Okay,
don't
so
we do
Ethan.
either?
So it's. Yeah, I'm torn. I have a Yamaha downstairs. Ben, what's the guitar? What's
it's
it?
an SA? One of the S, like a hollow body one, or is it solid?
Yeah,
It's similar to this, but I don't know if we can
Yeah.
mention.
it's like a 335, but
I think it's called I think it's an SA. That one's the one.
well, I mean, so this is
You
for
know-
Ethan. Ethan, you can tell I'm not a real gear aficionado. I love that guitar. I keep it down in my living room, and I play that through a little teeny Fender, like Champ, Super Champ. I don't know that I'd take a pedal. I mean, to be honest, I'm these days. I like a little overdrive every once in a while, but it's funny when I just naturally sit down to just play the guitar. A little reverb on an amp that's about as much as I need. I'm really happy playing with a clean sound, and that's really the truth. Now, I do take the Strats down every once in a while, so it's really a toss up between the guitars. There's something about that hollow body that maybe it's because I don't need an amp with it or something like that. But that's the truth. I mean, I love all these guitars, but it's if there was a Rickenbacker there, I'd take it. I'm not really the truthful answer is I'm not really that picky. Thanks for the question.
All right, so this one is from Noel,
Mhm.
and he asks, how much did your dad, Ron, push you as a musician or inspire you as a musician?
Ooh, I love that question. I can't. I love my dad so much. He died in 2018.
How old was he when he died?
80. He didn't think he'd make it to 80. Parkinson's ravaged him in the last 25 years of his life. The question was, how much was inspiration?
How much did he kind of push you to be a musician or inspire you as a musician?
Boy, I love that. The inspiration was at 150 at the low point. I loved the way that he wrote music. I loved the way that he talked about it. He didn't push me at all. And I asked him about that when I was probably 20, 21, maybe 22, and I started to make my way out on the West Coast. And I asked him why he didn't push me as much as, I wasn't critiquing his, he was my best man in my wedding. So that gives you an indication of my love for him. But it occurred to me that I had heard a lot of my friends talking about how relentless either their parents were pushing them or tried to drive them away from it. But he didn't seem to do that. And I asked him why. What was your reasoning for not pushing me? Because you certainly could have pushed me to do way more. And his answer to me was interesting. He said you were. I'm just talking to him right here. So, but
yeah, please,
not cutting you out. He said you were so eaten up with it. I felt my job, my duty, responsibility as your dad was to open other doors. In order, you were going to shut those doors at some point. It was obvious it was just going to be music. So consequently, he pushed me more from an educational standpoint. Didn't last long because when I had the chance to move out to the West Coast, I left college after a year. Not proud of that, but it was an opportunity. He pushed me more in sports, which I love, but it was everything but music. That's an interesting question that you would ask. But his answer, he said, you were going to do it. He said, I sensed that from day one. And he was right. There was nothing that was going to stop me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So the next question is from Tommy, and he asked how much of the rack gear that comprised of your Bradshaw rack was your choice, or was this stuff that Bradshaw was recommending to you? And was it typically programmed, or were you kind of like just dialing it in for the song each time?
On the first part of the question, it was a little bit of both. I was aware of what was being used. I mean, at that time, everything was all rack gear. Pedals were all of a sudden not a big deal. And as I've stated, I just kind of wanted to play. So I was aware of what everybody else was using. So I would get a version of that. You had to have some delays. U2 was rocking in the 80s. So that was a big component. Distortion, had to have a couple different versions of that. Chorus, a lot of that, And after that point, it was, and then Bob, obviously with his expertise, how about you try this, use this? So I would try things, and then whatever felt right, you keep it, and you lose the rest of it. So it was a combination.
Then would you normally have it all programmed, or would you kind of just dial up the sounds as needed for the session?
Again, a little bit of both. I mean, well, like in what we did today, it sounds like it was just a preset that probably was. I mean, on the Brad show, I can't remember how many banks of presets we had, but
I think you had like 4 banks. It was a Rocktron. It lolooked like at the end it was one of the Rocktron versions of the custom audio, and then it had like a Boss FV 100 or 200 volume pedal on there.
Yeah,
and then there was interesting names on some of the presets. There's one that said like Chutney, one that said Gumdrops.
No, that was Landau's.
No, this was yours. That was the one that Bukovac.
Really?
Yeah, it has like these different names.
I didn't put them on there.
Oh,
it was probably Bob. You know what I had? I mean, it was.
Chutney would have been pretty exotic for the 80s.
Yeah, I love Indian food. Yeah, I mean, you'd have your basic, levels of say chorus and delay, and I was able to program whether the direct signal was mixed into it also. Then you'd have different stages of distortion. I mean, mine wasn't as creative as like where Michael Thompson took his, because Tim Pierce, those guys integrated not just the racks, but then they had loads of pedals. And again, to each his own. I wasn't quite as driven by that, but there was, let's just suffice it to say, there were enough differences in the sounds that got me through the sessions. And then, of course, there'd be certain times when you'd have to step out, and if you were doing something that sounded too samey, or somebody, producer or artist said, no, I need something a little different, then you'd have to reach in your toolbox. And I had pedals sitting in the wings, different guitars and all that kind of stuff. So it was a game time decision. Good question.
So this one is from David. He asks, how in Giant would you develop a guitar solo? Was it thought out? Was it practiced patterns? He kind of noted, I'm sort of paraphrasing, that he said some of your stuff, like the combination of strings, wouldn't necessarily be that intuitive, but then you would go into more of like a standard pentatonic kind of run.
Yeah.
Was that sort of premeditated, or was that something that you were kind of working on or trying to develop all the time when you were taking solos on Giant songs?
I would, yes. I think he's got sense. I mean, there was always a component. You would allow for the component of improvisation. Moments would happen, and you'd make sure that you either kept that or you incorporated that. My first thought of any solo, and to this day, it's the same thing. It's just, I want a story, for lack of a better word. I want a thematic development. I want to feel some kind of connection with a melody, with a touch. A lot of time I would spend, I mean, if you just do, like, for instance, right? Sometimes start on the G string. There's 10 different ways you can play that one. Let's get my pick in my hand. I mean, just those are 3. Just to so I would experiment with something like that first of all. I was a son of a string arranger, so my fast runs are a little bit of chromaticism and pentatonic. I mean, I wasn't really schooled in all the scales. I couldn't name them, so I wasn't thinking in terms of, I'll use the Dorian, I'll use the the Mixolydians, all that kind of stuff. It was more, I would just hear something and start fiddling around with it. My picking technique was never pick every note. I can't honestly say that I know why. It wasn't that I didn't practice and I couldn't do it. I just didn't like the sound of it sounding like a machine gun. I like the difference between picking notes and hammer because it sounded more like a, say, a violin to me. So I would spend a lot of time searching those nuances, and probably more time than a lot of the producers had patience for, because for me, that was a world in itself. And so I loved guitar solos. So I didn't want to, I didn't want to limit myself by just saying, okay, I played a fast lick or it was improvised. I wanted to, when I put my guitar down and listen back, like that solo has to be in that song. That's as important as the melody and what I sang.
Dan, next question is from Andrew. He asked, do you miss your rack tones?
No,
No.
Andrew, that's a good. No, I had enough of them in the 80s and 90s, to be honest. Am I sentimental about them? Nostalgic? Yeah, it's great. I mean, we revisited them. No, I as a result of many things, in basically pursuant to the first question, as a guitar player, I'm really like. I'm glad I have this stuff here because I can do a couple things, but if left to my own devices, I probably would not use pedals, which was unimaginable to me when I was young. But for me, it's not that I'm this purist. I'm really not. I'm not lazy. I just like the sound of, when the camera was turned off for a second, I was just messing around with Mason's Ultra, what's it called? Phonics. I just don't want that much between my fingers and the tone, and that's because I enjoy hearing it without all the chachi. The chachi is important every once in a while. I mean, it'd be boring, and I don't think I could have done even my project without having effects, because after a certain point, just the same tone gets boring. But do I miss that? Not so much, no.
All right, next question. This was one I think that might have been the most asked of anything. This is from RJ. He asked, what's the backstory on Here I Go Again by Whitesnake in the radio edit where you play the solo on Here I Go Again?
Yeah, that was Keith Olsen, great rock producer. I can't remember how I got introduced to him, but he started using me on records. And one day he called up and I don't think I even knew who Whitesnake was at that time, to be honest. They hadn't released that record, the one that really, made it a big. David Coverdale used to sing in Deep Purple. That's why I knew the name. But so they had this record in the can. They had taken quite a long time over the course of a year. John Sykes was the guitar player, freaking great guitar player. Adrian Vandenberg played on it too. I think it was the majority, I believe, was Sykes. But John Kalodner, famous A&R guy, had an idea. He felt that this record, this Here I Go Again, was also a pop single. And according to David Coverdale, it took him so long to make that record. And I think he was kind of over it by that point. So Keith Olsen got tasked to do the single. And so at Goodnight LA, which was his studio, he hired studio players. And I'd worked for Keith and felt I was good for the song. Bill Cuomo, keyboard player. Denny Carmassi, I believe, played drums from Heart. I can't remember the bass player. I'm just too bad. Whatever it was, but we cut the song in like 3 hours, and I think David Coverdale was just like, "This can happen." Of course, we had a great template.
Right.
The idea though was to not defang it too much, but it's a gentler version. I mean, that was it had keyboards on it. The idea was to make it more accessible to the pop market. That's really what it was. So we did that thing, and it took us a half a day. Again, having a great song and having a record as a reference point, and the whole thing was to make it more pop version. So the solo was pretty simple. I like the tone of that thing. Keith used to always make me play through he had a you know about this. He had a Marshall combo. Mm-hmm. Do you know what that?
Was it a 212 or a 112?
212 open back.
So it's probably one of either the JMPs if it was from the 70s, or which is basically a predecessor to the JCM 800. And then there was a JCM 800, depending whether it was Was it like a more of a classic Marshall look, or was it more of a modern Marshall?
Classic, and it was.
Yeah, it was probably this like a combo JMP kind of 50.
And he would always tell me, "You got to play this Huff."
Okay.
And he would put it against the wall to kind of to make it a closeback, right?
Okay.
And so yeah, we just did that. We did that real quick one after.
Pedals or any of your rack stuff, or was it just straight in?
There's some clean stuff on there, right? Yeah, I haven't heard the record in a long time, but yeah, the clean stuff would have been my rack, right? I've been there, and then probably all the power guitar stuff would have been his Marshall. Solo, flip a coin. I don't know. I mean, there's enough. Is it a lot of delay on that solo? It's cleaner, wasn't it? It's probably his amp, you know.
Okay.
Yeah, but that was fun. And as a result, I will say I got invited to do Monsters of Rock with them.
Nice.
What a compliment. I mean, I just started Giant, so my manager was shocked that I would be so brazen. It wasn't brazen. I had other things that I was committed to, but to be asked to tour, join the band, that was something. Yeah.
Well, next question is from Marlon, and he said, "What guitar picks do you use?"
I used to use the little. I don't have any. I used to use the little Gibson. They weren't the teardrop, but they were the next thing to the teardrop, right? A little bigger teardrop, mediums. That seemed to be the pick that I would use. And then when I had our band, they made us some version of that, which I used until I ran out of them. Then I started using Fenders.
These mediums as well.
This is a Jim Dunlop, but yeah,
this one over here.
Yeah,
Fender. This is a heavy.
Oh yeah, well that's now. I started to use heavies when I made this record, but I always used mediums when I to kind of skirt the difference. Because when I play rhythm, any of the skanky kind of rhythm, the heavy picks don't give like I needed. I couldn't use light picks, so the medium picks were the way to go. And to this day, if I had my desert island pick, it would probably be a medium.
And do you turn it at all like some people do, where they'll get, like Ray Parker Jr. talks about using the meteor side of the pick? Okay.
No, but it's funny because now I think I when I'm just playing melodies, I like to play with a heavy pick.
All right. Ron asks, who's an artist, dead or alive, that you would want to work with but haven't yet?
I'd be a happy as a cartage assistant to Jeff Beck. I mean, okay, so that's an easy one. You know what? Alive. This won't happen, so I can just say it. I adore U2. I always have. And it's not even the kind of music that I do, but there's something about their intensity and their commitment to what they're saying that affects me. And I've been a fan ever since I saw their Joshua Tree. I was sitting on the back row of the stadium in LA. What's the Forum?
Hollywood Bowl. Okay.
Well, the Forum. Last minute, I got tickets to that. I sat on the back row, literally could look out over my shoulder and see LA. And how a band was able to transform that outdoor stadium into a fireside sing-along. It affected me, and I followed them ever since. And sometimes, rock, sometimes music has a hard time aging, shall we say, because a lot of the angst and that are the drivers are formulated in really young years, just rage, sexuality, all that kind of stuff. But from young people, I'm not saying it can't exist, and it does exist, but somehow they found a way to age.
Yeah, they've recreated themselves many times.
Yeah.
And but I think it's arguably it's been a while since they've kind of been at the zeitgeist,
You can't always be.
yeah, and you can't always be, but you could be, this chapter's Lanois, so maybe Edge and Bono, if you're out there,
Yeah, right.
here's your chance.
Well, and also we're essentially the same age.
Yeah.
So you grow with people. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a tough question. I mean, because there's really no solid answer, but that's the first thing that came to my mind.
I think that's totally appropriate.
Yeah.
Next one is from John. He asked, when you play sessions now versus in the 80s and 90s, how has your mindset changed as a guitarist?
First of all, I don't play sessions.
But like every once in a while you grab a guitar and
Yeah.
I've heard from plenty of people that, you'll ghost play, guitars.
Oh, well, no, I'll play on records. I mean, and I'm the easiest hire when I produce records because I pick up the guitar and I'm cheap for myself. So how has it changed?
What's your mindset like now when you have to pick up a guitar and play on a record versus how it would have been in the 80s and 90s?
First, the easiest thing is the lowest hanging fruit is my life doesn't depend on it. So I think I am freer to do less. I always feel like I got something to prove. It's not a necessity. It's more, if I get to play on something now, it's like the icing on the cake for me. Like I get to do that. Like a lot of times on of course, any artist that I've worked with, they're going to hear this and go, now we know why. For me, like I hire so many great guitar players, and because people that do things differently than what I would do. But I usually save solos for myself because it's like I still want to play. So I do it more for the fun now. And, that led to also what we just spent, half an hour talking about. I like playing the guitar.
Mm.
So it's more of that. Maybe I have a little less. Like I've developed into a really good second guitar player. I learned that when I did so many records with Keith Urban. I did so many records with Rascal Flatts and Joe Don Rooney, who I hear you're going to be.
We're going to be interviewing, and he said that they wouldn't even let him play the first two records, and that you were playing all this stuff, and that you were his advocate.
Oh yeah,
that got him so that he could actually play on his own records.
No, and it should have been, but yeah, I also learned the art to being, when you're young, you're kind of the alpha, don't have to be that, and you can find a lot of room to be a support. So that's the newest thing for me.
That's a great answer. Last question. This one's from Kelly. He asks, how did you go about choosing your preamp sound on a song in the 80s and 90s? You had like the Kasha, you had the Bradshaw one, you had
Marshall, I think too.
You had Marshall ones, and also a Boogie, that studio preamp.
Yeah.
Was there sort of an auditioning process? I think that this is what he's getting at. Was there like an auditioning process when you would kind of say, okay, this is the right one for the song? Like, how would you go about sort of choosing what the ultimate gear pieces were going to be for a particular song or a part?
Well, yeah, it's not like I auditioned them. It's not like I had 5 of them and I would audition them for each part of the song. I mean, I had a couple in my rack, and it was basically how it felt to play it. I mean, you can. I got a ton of distortion pedals sitting around, a ton of amps, but I think ultimately when you play something, it's your touch and how it resonates with it. How if you want like if I'm sitting there thinking. Like even we have 2 on this board right now, right? Yours is catching that. It's distorted, it's overdriven, but it allows the string still to kind of be there. The other one I set to the point where the saturation kind of carries me past that point where I don't have to be, shall we say, as exact. What I mean? But it also has a different flavor to it. It glosses over. It's a little bit more like a string instrument, right? So I would find those kind of variances in whatever preamps I had, And some of it was probably just that, that was the one to have. So I just twiddled enough with it to make it work for me. It wasn't, there was no grand plan in any of this stuff. I mean, that's probably what I'd say. There is no right answer. Whatever tickles you at the moment, it's like, and I know some people that change all the time. I'd like to get kind of past that and find something that feels like home. And then I keep wanting to go to how I play. So I'm sorry if that's not, Kelly, if that's a great answer.
I think that these are great. And again, I apologize to the folks out there. There were literally hundreds of questions. So I kind of had to sort through and consolidate and all that stuff. So I apologize to anybody that didn't get their exact question answered, but I'm sure that they're all going to be grateful that we were able to talk to you a bit about it. And Dan, just again, to finish off here, I'm just so grateful again that you had us, and I'm just honored to be sitting here with you in your studio and getting a second opportunity to talk to you. So thank you.
Thank you. You do a great interview, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good.